Buddy, how's it going? Stoutman coming back at you again today, and today I'm actually not going to be showing you some Blu-rays that I picked up. Nope, not doing it. This time around I'm going to be doing a movie review. So if you're not into movie reviews, I do apologize, but sometimes I like to do them, especially during holidays such as Halloween. October is the perfect month for reviews of, horror movies. And one thing I promised to do, I promised all of you eventually that I would provide a review of all 5 Final Destination movies, because I stopped watching the Final Destination movies after the second one way back when, because I was a huge fan of the first one. I really loved the first one. There were so many different things they did with it that was just, I felt like, fantastic, and I wanted to see more of that. And they decided to go in a completely different route with the second film. At least that's what I felt at the time. And then the third film, because of the second film going in a different route, I was not interested in the third film, or the fourth, or the fifth. So I just never got around to watching the others. And I felt like, well, I'm sure it's going to be crap just like the second one was. Because, again, I was really upset that they didn't go in the direction I wanted them to go in. Now, that's the kind of viewer I was at the time where, well, they didn't do what I wanted them to do. So, dumb upset me. But sometimes, being upset about those things, there's a reason behind them. So it helps to go back and actually watch those movies and figure out what those reasons were for why you didn't like them. So that's why I decided to do this review. I knew I would eventually get around to it, and I decided this Halloween would be the time that I did it, because I finally managed to pick up all 5 Final Destination movies. I got the first one on Blu-ray. I had that one for a while, but then I went ahead and picked up the second and third one on DVD, and then the fourth and fifth on Blu-ray. So, I figured the second one was the one I hated the most. I don't need it on Blu-ray. The third one I've heard is trash. I don't need it on Blu-ray. And then the fourth and fifth one I actually managed to find for, I believe, like less than $5 for both of them total at Half Price Books. So, yeah. I lucked out there. Didn't have to worry about it, End of the day, I still can't find the second film on DVD. I know I have it. I picked it up again at Half Price Books for like $1, but I don't know exactly where it is in my room, so I just watched it online. There was like a digital streaming thing through my cable provider, and they had it streaming on there, so I watched it through that. So I'll just be holding up these particular titles when I talk about them today, but I will not be holding up Final Destination 2 when I talk about it, which is a shame because I have a lot to talk about with that. Yes, I still believe it's a pile of crap. But I have good reasons for that now. Good reasons. So, before you get mad at me, allow me to explain. When it comes to the first Final Destination, there are a lot of reasons I liked it, but it was really one of those, I forget what they call it, teen screams or something like that. There was an era of horror films in the late 90s, early 2000s that had a bunch of teenagers coming together in the movie, and something terrible would happen to all of them. Dead teen movies, right? Something like... Roger Ebert coined a term that I can't remember right now, but if you look at Roger Ebert and teen horror films, you'll probably find it. The point is that there were a lot of movies of that ilk during the late 90s and early 2000s, and this was definitely one of them. It was definitely borrowing a lot of the same tropes, a lot of the same cliches from those types of movies. I mean, I'm almost certain what the Hollywood execs who put the money into this film wanted to see. But what they actually got was something that had, I think, a little bit of substance. Yes, it's not the best, most amazing plot or concept in the world, but there were little touches, little things here and there that made it kind of gothic, kind of spooky in a lot of ways. The very concept that death has a plan for us all, and how that plan works out, and how you could possibly cheat it. That was an interesting idea. And then the fact that they also had these little hints in there that were like, they were visual, they were auditory, there were a lot of different things that were providing hints. But one of the big ones was, of course, John Denver. Like, John Denver would always be playing. Colorado Rocky Mountain High in particular was a song that would always be playing right before one of these ridiculous events took place, right? That was supposed to be like one of the hints. So you always got like some kind of a visual hint, but you also got an audible hint. And it wasn't always, I guess you could say, but most of the time there was like some kind of an audible hint, and it was usually related to John Denver. Like, at least 3 or 4 different times in this movie, John Denver comes up and is some kind of a hint. So it's like a pattern. It's part of the pattern, right? There's some kind of an audible hint that is John Denver is the audible hint, and it is an audible pattern within the film that you're supposed to be able to use to pick up on Death's plan. You know what I mean? And I felt like that was a really interesting idea, using music, but also using an, in addition to visual, an audible, a completely separate audible thing that you can pick up on that might be a clue that something's about to happen. And that was the part that I was, more than anything, that I was really disappointed they didn't really continue on with in the second film. But at least they did in this one, and I felt like, even though going back to it now, you can tell that some of the acting is atrocious. It's still a lot of fun to watch, and there are still a lot of things that they do right in this movie that just aren't as good in any of the other movies. But that being said, we gotta go on. There are sequels, we're gonna watch them, and that's exactly what I did. When it comes to Final Destination 2, I really wanted to go back to it and come to the conclusion that maybe I had been wrong all this time, and maybe there was something redeemable about it. But honestly, this time around, I just picked up on all the things that actually made me not like it. And it's not like the things that made me not like it aren't valid concerns. They actually are valid problems. One of the big things being that the ending to the movie doesn't make any goddamn sense within the context of the plot. It literally doesn't make any sense. If you actually go back and watch it, it's just, it veers off into something completely other than what we were seeing in the rest of the movie with the whole pattern. It doesn't make any goddamn sense, right? It just really doesn't. Why would she be seeing this thing? I don't want to give away any spoilers, but like, why would she be seeing this thing over here, and why would it all center around her? And like, it just was a convoluted, stupid ending. And the only thing that made it make sense, at least somewhat, kind of, sort of, in the end, is that it eventually started to cycle around, or other people who were affected by the events and who would have been perhaps killed, but were stopped from being killed, ended up getting killed, you know. Death's design continued again, or continued on, you know what I mean? I maintain, like, I've tried to understand why she made the decision she did at the end, why there's suddenly this, I get it now, this has to happen because yada yada yada. And it's just like, if you actually look at when she says this has to happen because yada yada yada, it actually doesn't make any goddamn sense within the context of the fucking plot. It really doesn't. If you think you can explain it to me, have fun in the comments below, because there's no way to fucking explain it. It makes no fucking sense. But on top of that, they also got rid of the whole, the audible and the visual hint. Now, there was, in the very beginning, in the very opening scene that everybody seems to love, there was she turns on the radio and she hears Highway to Hell, right? And she mentions that a few other times, but she never hears it again. I believe you only hear it that one time in the film. It never becomes a pattern. It never becomes an audible cue to hint at the fact that perhaps something's going to happen. As a matter of fact, at some point in the movie, we eventually hear a little, in an elevator, a little like elevator music version of John Denver, which instead of actually being part of a pattern in this film, ends up being an homage to the original movie. And in that way, it's almost like they're saying that they want to pay respect to the original movie instead of, following it up with something that is a proper sequel. And they're not even trying to actually follow the exact plot as it was laid out in the first film. They're literally just paying homage to it by putting in little hints here, like, see, remember this from the first movie? Remember this from the first movie? It's just like, instead of actually being a proper sequel, it's remember this from the first movie. They're referencing things. They're not actually making it a part of a plan or part of a plot, part of the plot of the film. They're just throwing in references like memes, modern day culture. And I don't necessarily have a problem with memes, with the concept of meme culture, but it just didn't work in this movie because it felt like it was disrespecting the original source material. It was taking something as it was originally created in the first movie and just saying, I liked this part about it and this part about it, but I'm not going to do any of that. Like, they literally didn't do any of the things they were paying homage to in the film. And the only thing I really liked about it, the only redeeming quality I would say about the film, the acting isn't terrible, the story isn't terrible, the concept of them going to meet Clear isn't terrible, that's kind of interesting, but the redeeming quality is the concept that them cheating death in the first movie created like a reverberating ripple effect in Death's pattern. So for whatever reason, things were working backwards this time around. I thought that was really cool because then there's a possibility, or they could have decided to, in further sequels, to then make it go forward again and then backward again in the fourth movie and then forward again in the fifth movie, right? They could have done that and shown it as as the ripple of Death's pattern or something like that. Spoiler alert, they didn't do that, but it was an interesting concept that I did actually like about the second movie. So there was one redeeming factor of the second movie. It's just that it was ruined, I feel like, by the fact that they didn't follow anything else from the first movie, and when they change that aspect of it and make it like we're going to go backwards this time, it's almost like they're saying we don't want to do anything from the first movie. We want to make this our own thing. So they're not even giving the fucking concept a chance to breathe and become something that ripples throughout a bunch of movies. That goes throughout a bunch of movies. They're just saying we're going to change this now and make it our thing instead of working with what originally existed in the first movie. And that's what really bothers me about it. And then there's the fact that the plot at the end of the film, the ending doesn't really make any sense. There's just too many things that are wrong with this movie. I'm sorry, there really are. It's not a good movie. It really is not. It's kind of offensive to anybody who liked the first movie. But if you like it, whatever, I still think it's trash. It's garbage. I probably won't ever watch it again. I'm glad I only got the DVD. I'm never getting it on Blu-ray. No. So, from that point, I went on, of course, to Final Destination 3 on DVD. And if there's any redeeming quality about this one, I think most people agree this is not a good one. If there's any redeeming quality about Final Destination 3, it is that they really went with what the second movie did to the concept and just went buck wild with it. The second movie made it more of a complete and total ridiculous slasher. Instead of actually having like a plan and a plotted thing in it, the second movie, although there was a bit of a plot to it that almost kind of sort of tied to the first movie, but changed so many things that it wasn't the same thing anymore. But I digress. At the same time that they were doing that in the second movie, they were also making it more about the gore and stuff like that. So there were a lot more gory, disturbing scenes of death in the second one, I feel like, than in the third one. And the way the second movie ends with like this alternative rock at the end of it, almost as if to say, yeah, seeing these people get killed is rad, it's awesome, yeah. Like, you know, that's what they think the typical horror fan is like. I don't know what the reason was for that, but it was really just like a dude bro kind of an ending to end it with that kind of music, in my opinion. And then this movie took that whole dude bro thing to the nth level, to the nth degree. They literally just said, you know what, we're going to make it a comedy. And there is a horror comedy. And there are a lot of elements to this movie that are very comedic. Just disturbing as hell. The way that the actual deaths take place are very disturbing and messed up. And, you know, the special effects are good enough that they look believable enough that it's like, yeah, okay. It's kind of screwed up. It's messed up. They're pretty good death scenes, if you will. But that's my main problem. I'm not the kind of horror fan that just goes for like seeing people die on screen. You know what I mean? I'm not the kind of horror fan that just likes to watch a bunch of slasher movies and see people get killed. Like, that's not the reason that I watch these movies. I know for some people it is. They just literally skip to the part where people get killed and watch that over and over again, right? That is a certain segment of the horror community. But that's not where I fit into the horror community, so those kinds of scenes and the movies that glorify those kinds of scenes are not something I'm generally into. So even though this was a horror comedy, I just wasn't into the fact that they were just going balls to the wall, dude bro kind of fucking bull crap with it. And honestly, at least the plot in this one made more sense than the second one. And I will say that outright without any freaking... I have no problem saying that. I think I can definitively state this one has a more cohesive plot, a more cohesive story than the second one. But that's not saying much because it's still not very good. There are a lot of very unlikable characters, but then they're unlikable because they're going to get killed, you know? They make them unlikable so you want to see them get killed. That's the way these kind of horror comedy movies go when they're making something that's kind of poking fun at movies like this. So it's almost meta, almost self-referential in that way, where they're just making fun of movies like this by making a movie like this. You know what I mean? But even though it's trying to do that, they still didn't do a very good job of it. And there were a lot of elements in this movie, like the acting and the cinematography, and just there were a bunch of things in this movie that did not work. So, wasn't a fan, but I would say I liked it probably a little bit better than the second movie. I'm still not going to buy it on Blu-ray, but Yeah, it was okay. I might not ever watch it again, to be honest, but it was okay, and it was a fair continuation of the series. I don't remember if they had any kind of like pattern. I know they had patterns in the film, but I don't remember if they had any pattern of music or audio of any kind. So, yeah. Hey, I must look pretty freaking different now because I'm like wearing slightly different clothes and stuff. Not entirely different, but if you didn't notice before, now you do. I had to stop doing this video halfway through because I just ran out of battery and then I had to charge the battery and it took a while, so it's been a day or two since I did the first half of this video. But anyways, let's continue. I still have plenty to talk about when it comes to the Final Destination movies. I think I said enough about this one. It's not a very good movie. I didn't really like it. There were elements of it, I think, that I liked a little bit better than the second one because it was more of like a horror comedy, but it was still not very good. So, no desire to get this one on Blu-ray or anything like that. But, next up came the Final Destination. And, honestly, it wasn't as bad as the third one. That was what I took away from it, first and foremost. The fourth one here was actually pretty darn good. It wasn't, I wouldn't say it was like fantastic, right? Maybe a 6 or a 6.5 out of 10 or something like that. I don't even think I'd give it a 6.5 out of 10, honestly. But, there were elements of it that I enjoyed. The mere fact that there's a character in it who is a redneck, racist asshole. Want to say a Nazi. He does have like Nazi symbols on him and stuff like that. But there's a character like that in this movie who dies, and the way that he dies is exactly the way you want to see him die, and it's definitely fan service for horror fans. Just glorious, beautiful scene, and for that scene alone, I have to say, this one's totally worth having. Just to see that one scene alone. Because, man, it's just... it adds a little something to the movie. Now, this movie does a lot of what the third movie did in putting a bunch of characters on screen that you can't relate to, that you don't really like, that aren't really likable at all, so that you can see them all die in sometimes hilarious ways, sometimes disturbing ways. But they also, I feel like, change a few things here and there, and they don't necessarily go as hardcore in terms of... I wouldn't say it's not like they don't go hardcore enough. It's more that they aren't doing it for the same reasons that the third movie did it. You know what I mean? The third movie is very much like I said, a kind of a horror comedy, and they were specifically intending to just do as disturbing a scene as possible. You know what I mean? Like they were trying to be like that, and the second one was like that as well. They had elements of that in this one, but it was more trying to return to the story as it existed in the first movie. There were certain things that we saw come back again, like the audible cues and the visual cues. Those things started to come back again, albeit in a slightly different way, but we still were seeing those things. There was just a new element to the way that they were doing it, right? So I did actually kind of like this movie. I was surprised because, after the second one I figured there's no way any of these are going to be any good, but apparently they managed to make a few decent ones here at the end, and the Final Destination is one of them. It's not great, but it's acceptable, and just for one or two scenes in particular, I am glad to have it in my collection, especially on Blu-ray. I get to see those scenes in high def. Perfect. But the last one, ironically, like I said, after all this hating on what they did to the Final Destination series, how they ruined it. And they did kind of ruin it, but, regardless of that, that doesn't mean there's nothing redeemable. And that's what I thought for a long time was there can't be anything redeemable about any of these movies. Well, I think the fifth one here actually proved me wrong, because I actually kind of liked what they did with this one, but it still wasn't the same thing as the first movie. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, because what they actually did with the movie kind of felt like they were taking the original concept and twisting it and making it their own. They weren't necessarily trying to do the same thing over again. They were trying to do the same thing, but in a slightly different way, where these people are, most of them not very likable, and there's almost like an air of gothic, or it's not really scary per se, is what I would say. There are a lot of moments in this movie that most people would look at and say were dull. They didn't have as much punch as the ridiculous over the top scenes that you see in the second, third, and the fourth movie, right? And even in some cases didn't have as much punch as some of the scenes you see in the first movie. But there were a few scenes in this movie that were very disturbing, and it was the way that they told the story. It was the actual plot concept behind the story, because there was things that happened like at the very beginning of the movie that at the time I was thinking, God, that's an odd choice of song. Is that going to come into play at some point? And by the end of the movie, if you've been paying attention, it actually does. It all makes sense. It's like if you're paying attention and you realize what actually happened there, it all comes to light and all makes sense. And it's just crazy, because this whole time I'm watching this movie thinking, well, when are they going to mention the Flight 180, people who died in a plane crash, the whole thing, which you see play throughout all the other Final Destination movies. I never expected that to be the case. I thought they'd for sure just leave that plot line to its own, but no, they always found a way to sneak it in. And honestly, I didn't like it when they did that for this third one, because it felt like, okay, this isn't even really Final Destination anymore. Would you stop that, please? But again, the fourth movie kind of redeemed it, and then this one, I was just sitting here watching it thinking, well, wait a minute, where's this thing from it, and where's that thing from it? But I couldn't hate it because the story was so damn good. It was actually working for what it was. It didn't feel necessarily like, it felt like, I guess aspects of it felt like Final Destination, right? But other aspects were very much not exactly the same thing as what Final Destination was. So it was just really odd at times to feel like, even though it's not the Final Destination that I liked when I was a teenager, it's actually pretty good and I don't really hate it, you know what I mean? And then the way it ended was just like, all right, this adds kind of a new dimension to things, and even some new rules that maybe we didn't know about before. And I'm okay with this movie being one that just adds rules and adds a mythos to the overall plot concept of the Final Destination movies. So I gotta say, aside from the first movie, this one's my favorite. It's almost like right behind it. And I put it right behind it because there were elements of it that weren't very good. There was a lot of acting in this movie. It was freaking terrible. It did, of course, borrow from the previous few movies in terms of being more of a horror comedy. But there were a few moments of comedy in the first one as well. Not that many, but some. It was more just teen comedy in that movie, though. This time around, it's not necessarily teen comedy. It's just, humor for people who have seen way too many horror movies, right? But whatever the case may be, I did appreciate what they did with this one overall. I felt like maybe the acting could have been better. Maybe some of the music could have been better. Maybe some of the shot selection could have been better. Like, it wasn't necessarily a excellent film in terms of the way that it was shot or anything. It wasn't necessarily an excellent film in terms of the way that the characters, the actors portrayed their characters. But the story, the script behind this movie was pretty damn good. So, yeah, I mean, they kind of saved it, and it's sad because this is the last one. It feels like they saved the freaking franchise with this movie, and then they just stopped making them. And now I feel bad because I'm one of those guys who said, nope, there's no way that any of these movies are going to be any good after the second one because they totally ruined it with the second one. Well, I never gave it a chance, and I'm paying the price now because I really liked the last one. I wish they'd do more, and it's been like 6 years. This came out in like 2011, right? Something like that. 2011, 2012, 2011, yeah. Came out in 2011. So, been a while, and it doesn't look like they're going to be making any others, so, well, we'll see. Usually at some point they go ahead and do like a reboot or something. And we'll see if they decide to do anything with the concept in this movie. But honestly, just knowing Hollywood the way I do, they're probably going to take a look at what sold and then try to fit their script around that. And I believe that the first movie sold pretty well, but I think because the others did, because they went ahead and did 2, 3, 4, and 5, I'm pretty sure the middle ones sold pretty well as well. If they hadn't sold well, we wouldn't have seen all these sequels. So it pains me to think that they might bring it back and then glorify all the shitty parts of the concept that were never supposed to be a part of this freaking story in the first place, and were just added in by filmmakers who thought they were being clever and were really just doing stupid shit and ruining the very concept that I enjoyed about the first one. If you can believe it, I'm still just like jaded about the whole thing because I feel like if they do a sequel at this point or a reboot or whatever, it's probably going to be bad because they're probably not going to take anything from this. If this one didn't sell well enough for them, they're going to say, oh, well, clearly people didn't like this movie, so we shouldn't do anything more like this movie. We should just pretend this one never existed. And I'm like sitting here, but that's the one I liked. That's the one I liked. I can't believe I'm saying it, but that's the one I liked. Okay, that'll do it for me. Those are my thoughts on Final Destination as a series. Again, I still haven't found the second one on DVD, even though I do have it, but yeah. Final Destination 2 would be slotted in there, 3 here. They're both on DVD, 2 and 3, because I don't care about them. And then 4 and 5. I like this one. I have a few scenes in this one enough to continue owning it without any problem. And I enjoyed this one quite a bit, so yeah, glad I have them on Blu-ray. But yeah, I guess in the end, middle ones suck. The movies on the end, they're alright. I can't complain. That'll do it for me. Thanks for watching, guys. Catch you later. Peace.